I couldn't believe my eyes. Emma, my wife of 6 years, was topless, straddling the lap of a man in the hot tub below. From the look on her face and his, it was obvious they were deeply engrossed in something far more than casual fun. What the hell was happening? Fury surged through me as I pulled out my phone and recorded a short video. My first instinct was to storm down there, but instead, I sank into the nearest chair, my mind racing. The scene didn't just hurt. It shattered something inside me. No wonder Emma had insisted I skip this party. Emma and I had been living in Chicago, Illinois, where she worked as a personal assistant for B&H Investments, a boutique hedge fund firm. At 34, she was outgoing, confident, and had a sharp wit that people were drawn to. I'd always admired her charisma, but now I wondered if I'd been blind to something darker. Earlier that week, I had seen a text pop up on her phone about the company Christmas party. It mentioned that employees could bring a +1, so I casually asked if I could join her. "Oh, Ethan, you'd hate it," she said, brushing me off. "These parties are full of investment talk and financial jargon. Trust me, you'd be bored stiff." "I don't know," I replied, suspicious of her unusually defensive tone. "Maybe I'd just like to spend the evening with my wife for a change." Her tone softened, but her words still stung. "It's not that I don't want you there," she said. "It's just these events can get a little wild. You might see something that, well, you wouldn't enjoy." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, frowning. "Nothing. Just office shenanigans," she said quickly, waving it off. But something in her demeanor seemed off. Emma, always so composed, was clearly nervous. That conversation lingered in my mind all week. Emma was 34, I was 35, and while our marriage hadn't been perfect, I thought we were solid. But lately, she'd been distant. Work trips had become more frequent, and her phone was always glued to her hand, with notifications coming in at odd hours. Still, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt until tonight. On the evening of the party, Emma was uncharacteristically quiet as we got ready. She told me earlier in the week to bring swim trunks, which struck me as odd. "Swim trunks? For a Christmas party?" "It's freezing outside," I said, trying to make sense of it. She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "We always end up at Marcus's penthouse after the main party. He has this incredible rooftop hot tub. It's kind of tradition. Tradition, you seem to know a lot about it." She gave me a forced laugh. "Well, I've worked there for over a year now. I mean, you could skip the hot tub if you'd rather not. Just try to keep an open mind tonight." "Okay." The phrase open mind felt like a warning, but I pushed my unease aside. If I'd known then what I know now, I wouldn't have come within a mile of that party. When we arrived at the event, the atmosphere was a mix of opulence and excess. It was held at a high-end downtown hotel with music blasting, expensive cocktails flowing, and a crowd of well-dressed professionals schmoozing. Emma immediately introduced me to a colleague, Lauren. "Lauren, this is my husband, Ethan," she said, her tone bright but distant. Lauren's eyes lit up with amusement as she looked me over. "Husband, you've got yourself a real wild one," she said, her voice dripping with something I couldn't quite place. Emma laughed nervously. "Oh, stop. He doesn't need to hear your stories." I frowned. "Stories? What stories?" "Oh, nothing important," Emma said quickly, grabbing my arm. "Can you give me a drink? Maybe a glass of Merlot?" I nodded reluctantly and made my way to the bar. By the time I returned with her wine, she was gone. For the next 30 minutes, I wandered through the ballroom, searching for her. I saw co-workers dancing, laughing, and exchanging knowing glances, but Emma was nowhere in sight. Frustrated, I eventually found an empty table and sat down, nursing my drink and watching the crowd. 2 hours later, I was done. I hadn't seen Emma since she'd asked for her drink, and I felt like an outsider at my own wife's work party. The few people who glanced my way offered polite but distant smiles, as if unsure of who I was or why I was there. Finally, I stood up, ready to leave. If Emma wasn't going to spend the evening with me, I didn't see the point in staying. As I approached the exit, Emma appeared out of nowhere with Lauren and 3 other men in tow. "There you are," Emma exclaimed, her voice a little too cheerful. She stumbled slightly, and I could smell the tequila on her breath. "We were looking all over for you." "Yeah, sure you were," I muttered. "Where have you been for the last 2 hours?" Emma's face flushed as the men around her exchanged smirks. One of them, an older guy with slick back hair, wrapped his arm around her waist as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We were just having a few shots," Lauren said, her voice light but tinged with something smug. "Shots of what?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "I can smell tequila, but there's something else." "Oh, don't be ridiculous," Emma said quickly, brushing off my question. "Hey, listen, we're heading to Marcus's place now. Are you coming? Am I actually going to get to spend time with you? Or are you planning to ignore me again?" I snapped. Emma's face turned red, and one of the men chuckled under his breath. "Oh, don't be like that," she said, her tone defensive. "You'll see me later. I'll ride with Lauren and the guys." "You still here?" Incredulous. "Why not ride with me?" Before she could answer, one of the men grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. "Come on, dude," he said, grinning. "You can follow us." As I watched Emma disappear with them, laughing as they left, I clenched my fists and took a deep breath. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what. I followed them to Marcus's penthouse, a lavish high-rise overlooking the city. The place was everything you'd expect from someone in the hedge fund world, sleek, modern, and over-the-top luxurious. As I parked and walked inside, I saw Emma had already changed into a bikini. She was sitting in the hot tub with Marcus and another man I didn't recognize. "Ethan, there you are," Lauren called out from across the room. She walked over to me, holding a drink in each hand. "You look like you could use one of these." "No, thanks," I said curtly, my eyes glued to Emma. The way she was laughing, leaning into Marcus, and playfully splashing water was enough to make my blood boil. Lauren leaned closer, her tone suddenly conspiratorial. "So, what do you think? Ready to join the fun? What are you talking about?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. She tilted her head, feigning surprise. "I just assumed you two had one of those open arrangements. I mean, the way Emma's been enjoying herself tonight. What the hell are you implying?" I interrupted, my voice low and dangerous. Lauren smirked, unbothered by my tone. "Look, Ethan, I don't mean to upset you, but it's kind of obvious. Emma's been friendly with Marcus and a few others for months now. I figured you were in on it." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What are you saying? That my wife's been cheating on me?" Lauren hesitated, then leaned in closer. "Well, yeah, I thought you knew. She always said you were cool with it, but I guess not." I turned away, unable to process what I just heard. My hands clenched in a fist as I tried to steady my breathing. "Ethan," Lauren added, her voice softer now. "I know this is a lot, but if it makes you feel any better, she does love you. She talks about you all the time." "That doesn't make me feel better," I said through gritted teeth. "It makes me sick." I walked past Lauren and headed toward the stairs. I needed air, or maybe just a moment to think before I exploded. As I climbed, laughter and voices echoed from the hot tub below. It was all so casual, so cavalier. How could she do this to me? When I reached the balcony overlooking the hot tub, I froze. What I saw confirmed everything Lauren had said and more. Emma wasn't just sitting in the hot tub anymore. She was straddling Marcus while the other man stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders. Their movements were unmistakable. My heart pounded in my chest as I pulled out my phone and hit record. If she wanted to deny it later, I'd have proof. I couldn't watch anymore. I turned away, trembling with rage, and headed back downstairs. The noise from the hot tub followed me as I crossed the room and grabbed Emma's arm. "Oh, Ethan," she said, startled. "What are you doing? Come join us." "Come with me," I said coldly, dragging her into what appeared to be Marcus's office. I slammed the door shut and turned to face her. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice innocent, as if nothing had happened. "What's wrong?" I repeated, my voice barely controlled. "Were you ever going to tell me about your extracurricular activities? Or were you just going to keep humiliating me behind my back?" Emma's face fell. "Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, pulling out my phone. I hit play on the video and shoved it in front of her. She gasped as she watched herself, her cheeks flushing red. "Ethan, it's not what it looks like," she began, but I cut her off. "It's exactly what it looks like." I shouted. "How long, Emma? How long have you been doing this?" She looked away, silent. "I can't believe you," I said, my voice shaking. "I trusted you. I loved you, and this is how you repay me. It didn't mean anything, she said weakly. It was just fun. Fun? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Is that what you call this? Humiliating me, betraying me, destroying our marriage? I love you, Ethan, she said, tears streaming down her face. This doesn't change that. It changes everything, I said. I slipped off my wedding ring and placed it in her hand. We're done. Don't bother coming home. I'll be seeing a lawyer on Monday. Ethan, please, she cried, but I was already walking away. As I passed through the living room, Marcus called out, Hey, Ethan, leaving so soon. You got a hell of a wife there. I stopped and turned to face him. Glad you like her, I said coldly. She's all yours now. I drove home in a haze, my mind replaying everything I had seen and heard. The betrayal felt like a knife to the heart, twisting with every memory of the life Emma and I had built together. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the house we'd shared for the past 5 years. The weight of it all settled in my chest. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of the future I thought we had. When I finally stepped inside, the silence of the house was deafening. I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a whiskey, and sat at the kitchen table trying to make sense of what to do next. My phone buzzed with calls and texts from Emma, but I ignored them all. I didn't want to hear her excuses or apologies. After finishing my drink, I grabbed a few trash bags and began packing her things. Clothes, toiletries, anything that belonged to her. I tossed it all into the bags without a second thought. By the time I was done, her car was loaded with everything she owned. I parked it in the driveway, removed the garage door opener, and changed the security code. She wasn't coming back here. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I collapsed onto the bed, too drained to even undress. Sleep came quickly, but it was restless, filled with fragmented dreams of Emma's laughter and Marcus's smug grin. The next morning, the house phone jolted me awake. I grabbed it still groggy. Hello? I muttered. Ethan, it's me. Emma's voice came through, shaky and desperate. Please come get me. We need to talk. I sat up, my anger flaring all over again. You're not my problem anymore, Emma. Ethan, please, she begged. Just let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I said firmly. You've been lying to me for over a year. If you have anything to say, you can say it to my lawyer. Your car is in the driveway with all your stuff. Don't call me again. I hung up before she could respond, then unplugged the house phone. I didn't want to hear her voice or her pleas. The sound of her desperation was almost satisfying, a small consolation for the pain she'd caused. That afternoon, after plugging the phone back in, I saw her car was gone. Good. I thought maybe she's finally getting the message. I spent the rest of the day looking up divorce lawyers and reading about the process in Illinois. The laws were straightforward enough, a no-fault divorce, which meant no need to prove wrongdoing, though the evidence I had might still play a role in the settlement. By the end of the day, I'd found a promising attorney named Jennifer Harlow. Her website highlighted her success in handling cases involving infidelity, and I was confident she could help me. I called her office and scheduled a consultation for Monday afternoon. Before heading to bed, I checked my phone. 2 messages from unknown numbers had come in during the night. Each had a video attached. Hesitant, I opened the first one. The video showed Emma in Marcus's penthouse, but this time she wasn't alone with just Marcus and the other man from the hot tub. There were 3 other men present, and what they were doing. My stomach churned as I paused the video, unable to watch more. The second video wasn't any better. In it, Marcus held up my wedding ring, smirking at the camera before tossing it onto the floor. Emma laughed as if it were the funniest thing in the world. I clenched my phone, my knuckles white with anger. If I'd had any lingering doubts about filing for divorce, they were gone now. This wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty. I transferred the videos to my computer and made multiple backups. Part of me wanted to send them to her family, her friends, and anyone who thought Emma was a decent person. But Jenny's website had warned against retaliatory actions that could harm my case, so I restrained myself for now. Monday came quickly, and I met with Jenny in her sleek downtown office. She was sharp, no nonsense, and exactly what I needed. Where would you like her served? She asked after reviewing my evidence. At her office, I replied without hesitation. I want her and her little boyfriend to experience some of the humiliation they've put me through. Jenny nodded. Understood. I'll also file for a temporary restraining order to protect you in case they try to retaliate. Thanks, I said. I'm counting on you. On my way home, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ethan? It's Marcus, the voice on the other end said. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. What do you want? Look, I know you're upset about what happened, but this is getting out of hand, Marcus said, his tone more professional than I'd expected. Do we really need to involve lawyers? I mean, it was just some harmless fun. Harmless? I snapped. You got some nerve calling it that. You destroyed my marriage and humiliated me in the process. Marcus hesitated. Look, we never meant to hurt you. Emma told us you were okay with it. She lied, I said coldly. And now you're going to pay for it. Don't call me again. I hung up and drove the rest of the way home, my mind racing with thoughts of the divorce, the videos, and what lay ahead. One thing was certain, Emma and Marcus had underestimated me, and they were about to find out just how far I was willing to go. Wednesday afternoon brought a moment of grim satisfaction. Emma and Marcus were served with the divorce papers and restraining orders at her office. I imagined the shock on their faces as they realized their actions were finally catching up with them. Later that evening, the phone rang. It was Lauren. I can't believe you actually did it, she snapped. You didn't even give Emma a chance to explain herself. She had a year to explain herself, Lauren, I replied coldly. Instead, she spent that time lying and humiliating me. I owe her nothing. She's devastated, Lauren said. She's been crying all day. Do you even care about what this is doing to her? Do I care? I repeated, my voice rising. Did she care about what she was doing to me for over a year? Did she care when she laughed while they threw my wedding ring on the floor? No, Lauren. I don't care. And don't call me again. I ended the call and blocked her number. My resolve was solidified. There was no going back. Later that night, I was sitting on my balcony with a beer when the doorbell rang, followed by loud, aggressive pounding. My stomach sank as I stood up, grabbing the small baseball bat I kept by the door for protection. Ethan, a familiar voice slurred. Open the door, you coward. It was Marcus. I peered through the peephole and saw him standing with another man, both visibly drunk. They were shouting obscenities, their voices echoing through the quiet neighborhood. You're violating a restraining order, I said loudly through the door. Leave now, or I'll call the police. You wouldn't dare. Marcus yelled, pounding harder. Open the door and face me like a man. Without hesitating, I dialed 911. The operator assured me officers were on their way, and I waited with the bat in hand, my heart pounding. Marcus continued shouting, threatening to break down the door. His friend egged him on, laughing drunkenly. Moments later, the flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers illuminated the street. Two officers approached, ordering Marcus and his companion to step away from the door. They resisted at first, but the officers quickly subdued them, handcuffing both men. One of the officers knocked on my door. Mr. Carter, are you okay? I nodded and handed him the restraining order. They've been harassing me and trying to break in. The officer took notes as I recounted the events, then nodded. They'll spend the night in custody. If they contact you again, let us know immediately. As Marcus was led away, he glared at me over his shoulder. This isn't over, Ethan. You'll pay for this. Not likely, I muttered, closing the door and locking it behind me. The next morning, news of Marcus's arrest hit the local papers. The headline read, Hedge fund executive arrested after confrontation at estranged husband's home. The story didn't go into much detail, but it was enough to tarnish Marcus's already shaky reputation. Over the following weeks, more articles surfaced about the collapse of B and H investments. Clients were pulling their money out, citing concerns about the company's integrity. It wasn't long before the firm announced it was shutting down entirely. Meanwhile, Emma had been uncharacteristically silent. I hadn't heard from her since she was served with the papers, but I knew it wouldn't last. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, Jenny called with an update. Ethan, I have news, she said. Emma has retained an attorney and is petitioning the court for mandatory counseling sessions. What? I asked, incredulous. Can they force that? Yes, Jenny said. The judge has approved 6 sessions. You're required to attend. There's no way I'm reconciling with her, I said firmly. I understand, Jenny replied, her voice calm. But it's important you go. If the counselor sees there's no chance of reconciliation, it will work in your favor. Fine, imaterd. Anything else? Yes, she said, hesitating slightly. Emma claims to be pregnant. The words hit me like a freight train. Pregnant? You got to be kidding me. She's around 10 weeks along, according to her attorney. The court won't finalize the divorce until paternity is determined. If the child is yours, you'll be responsible for child support. I took a deep breath, trying to process the news. So I have to wait months for this to be over? Yes. But in the meantime, the judge has granted a legal separation. It's not ideal, but it's progress. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Thanks for the update. When the first counseling session arrived, I entered the office feeling a mix of dread and anger. Abigail Thompson, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor, greeted me warmly. Emma was already seated on a love seat, her expression subdued. Good to see you could make it, Mr. Carter, Dr. Thompson said, gesturing for me to sit. I chose a chair a few feet away, unwilling to sit beside Emma. Mrs. Carter, Dr. Thompson began, what do you hope to achieve from these sessions? Emma's voice trembled as she spoke. I want to save our marriage. I made mistakes, but I love Ethan, and I want us to be a family. I scoffed, unable to hold back. Dr. Thompson turned to me. And you, Mr. Carter? What do you want from these sessions? I want her to understand that this marriage is over, I said bluntly. She destroyed my trust, humiliated me, and lied to me for over a year. There's no coming back from that. Dr. Thompson nodded thoughtfully. Not even for the sake of the child? I looked at Emma, then back at Dr. Thompson. If it's my child, I'll pay child support. But that's the extent of my involvement with her. I'll never forgive what she's done. Dr. Thompson's eyes narrowed as she studied me. I see. Mrs. Carter, would you care to respond? Emma wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I've made mistakes, big mistakes, but I love Ethan. I never stopped loving him. I was just stupid. I laughed bitterly. Stupid doesn't begin to cover it. Do you think love justifies what you did? You betrayed me for over a year, Emma, and now you expect me to forget all of it? Her eyes pleaded with me. I wasn't thinking clearly. It wasn't about you, Ethan. It was about me, my insecurities, my need to feel spare me, the psychology lesson. I interrupted, my voice sharp. You didn't just cheat. You humiliated me deliberately. You planned it, Emma. That's what I can't forgive. Emma's face crumpled as she broke into sobs. Dr. Thompson raised a hand, signaling for a pause. Let's take a step back, she said gently. Mr. Carter, I understand your anger, but this isn't the place to lash out. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Fine, but let's not pretend this is salvageable. Dr. Thompson turned to Emma. Mrs. Carter, can you acknowledge the pain your actions have caused? Emma nodded vigorously. I know I hurt him. I hate myself for it. Do you? I muttered under my breath. Dr. Thompson ignored my comment. This process isn't about assigning blame. It's about determining whether there's a path forward. Let's leave it here for today. I'll meet with each of you individually before our next session. I nodded curtly and stood to leave, not sparing Emma a glance as I walked out the door. That evening, as I sat on my balcony nursing a beer, the phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? I answered. Ethan, a familiar voice said. It was Lauren. I hope you're happy. Emma's in the hospital. My grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? She had a miscarriage, Lauren said coldly. She told me what you said to her during counseling. You practically pushed her into this. I closed my eyes, a mix of emotions flooding through me. Don't blame me for this, Lauren. Emma made her choices. This is on her. You're heartless, she spat. The least you can do is go to the hospital and provide your insurance information. Legally, she's still your wife. For a moment, I wanted to tell her to go to hell. But Jenny's advice echoed in my mind. Any negative reaction could hurt my case. Fine. What room is she in? Lauren gave me the details, and I headed to the hospital. When I arrived, I spoke to the doctor and provided the necessary information. What happened? I asked. The doctor shook his head. It's hard to say. Stress could have played a role, but there's no definitive cause. She's about 9 or 10 weeks along. She'll recover physically, but emotionally, that may take longer. 9 or 10 weeks. The timing meant the child could have been mine, but I'd never know for sure now. As far as I was concerned, this loss only accelerated the inevitable. I walked into Emma's hospital room, where she lay pale and tear-streaked. Lauren stood at the foot of the bed, glaring at me. "Are you satisfied now?" she hissed. "Be quiet," I said firmly. She recoiled, but didn't leave. I turned to Emma, who looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I nodded. "I'm sorry for your loss, but this doesn't change anything. We're still getting divorced." She sobbed quietly. "I don't want to lose you. You already lost me." "Emma," I said, my voice calm but resolute. "You did that the moment you decided I wasn't enough. This is the end." I turned and walked out, leaving Lauren to console her. My emotions were a tangled mess, but one thing was clear. I was done with Emma for good. A few days later, Jenny called again with an update. "Emma has dropped her objections to the divorce," she said. "She's agreed to a clean break." Finally, a weight lifted from my shoulders. Does this mean it's over? Almost. There's still the financial settlement, but I've reached an agreement with B and H Investments as well as Marcus and his associate. They've offered a substantial payout to avoid a lawsuit. "How substantial?" I asked. Jenny chuckled. "You'll see when the check arrives." When I received the check a week later, I was stunned. It was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. "Minus my fee, of course," Jenny said with a grin. "Worth every penny," I replied. In the months that followed, the fallout from the scandal only grew. B and H Investments shut down completely as clients pulled their money, unwilling to be associated with a company tainted by scandal. Marcus and his associate left the city, their reputations in shambles. Emma and Lauren stayed in Chicago, taking jobs at a small retail store. Occasionally, I'd see them around town, but I never acknowledged them. My anger had faded, replaced by indifference. For the first time in years, I felt free.